It's the morning of Monday, August 21st, 1911. The bustling French capital of Paris is just waking up, people are hurrying to their offices, grabbing their morning coffee, and three men, they just casually stroll right out of the Louvre Museum. But, they definitely aren't early bird tourists. They'd actually spent the entire previous night hiding inside the museum, and tucked super securely under a blanket in their arms is a stolen piece of property. Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer brazenness of this heist is just absolutely incredible. They hide overnight, snatch their prize, and literally sneak out in the early morning with the item just wrapped in a blanket. By 8:45 a.m., they hop on a train at a nearby station and poof, they completely disappear. The rest of the world is just waking up, totally unaware that these three guys had just successfully pulled off the theft of the most famous painting in human history, the Mona Lisa. And to really put the stakes of that morning into perspective for us, today, the estimated value of the Mona Lisa is hovering right around $1 billion. $1 billion. That's astronomical. So how on earth did this single painting become the most valuable, most famous artwork on the planet? What secrets is she hiding? Well, to understand the mastermind theft of 1911, we first have to understand the mystery and the absolute mastery of the art itself. Section 1. Unmasking Madame Lisa. To figure out who she really is, we've got to hit pause on our true crime story and rewind the clock way back to 1503. This is when the legendary Italian polymath, Leonardo da Vinci, who was, not just a painter, but a brilliant engineer, scientist, sculptor, and architect, first started working on this masterpiece. For centuries, the art world was obsessed with one burning question: who exactly is the woman in the painting? Well, the answer is actually hidden right in the famous names we call her. Back in 1550, an Italian artist named Giorgio Vasari wrote a biography of Da Vinci and revealed the woman was Lisa Berardani. She was the wife of a Florentine silk trader named Francesco Giocondo. So the name Mona Lisa? It literally comes from Madonna Lisa, with Madonna traditionally meaning madam in Italian. Over time, the English translation just dropped an N, giving us Mona Lisa, or Madame Lisa. But wait, she has another name. Since she married Francesco Giocondo, she became Lisa Giocondo. In Italian, Giocondo translates to light-hearted or cheerful. In French, they spell it with a J, becoming La Joconde. So if you actually go to the Louvre in Paris today, you'll see her labeled right there as La Joconde. But despite Vasari spilling the beans way back in 1550, people just love a good mystery, right? So for a long time, nobody really believed him. All these wild theories started popping up. Some folks thought it was Da Vinci's mother, others swore it was an Italian queen. Honestly, the craziest theory, which got really popular in 1987 when artist Lillian Schwartz used some early digital tools, claimed it was actually a self-portrait of Da Vinci in drag. No way, right? Well, we can finally put those myths to bed. In 2004, a Florentine professor named Giuseppe Palanti definitively proved it's Lisa Giocondo. After 25 years of digging through dusty archives, he discovered that Da Vinci's father and Lisa's husband were actually super close friends, and it was almost certainly Da Vinci's dad who commissioned the painting. And this brilliantly illustrates the real human history behind the canvas. Let's look at the timeline here. In 1495, at age 16, Lisa marries Francesco. Fast forward to 1499, tragedy strikes, and she loses a daughter. Then in 1502, she has a second son. So by the time Da Vinci starts painting her in 1503, she's 24 years old. Experts think the painting was commissioned either to celebrate a new house they bought or the birth of that second son. But, and this is a really fascinating detail, if you look closely at the actual painting, there's a sheer, dark veil draped over Lisa's hair. Because of the heartbreaking loss of her daughter just a few years prior, a lot of historians actually believe this is a mourning veil. Now, all of this brings up a massive geographical puzzle. If Da Vinci was Italian, and Lisa Giocondo was Italian, and the whole thing was commissioned in Florence, Italy, why on earth is it hanging in the Louvre Museum in France today?
Well, the answer is a royal relocation. In 1516, King Francis I of France invited Da Vinci to come live in his country. And when Da Vinci packed up his life, he tossed the Mona Lisa right in his luggage. Records actually suggest he hadn't even finished it yet. He was still obsessively tweaking it, 15 years after he started. Anyway, Da Vinci passed away in France in 1519, and the king basically just kept the painting for his royal collection. It hung out in French palaces for over 150 years until the French Revolution, when it was finally moved over to the Louvre Museum in 1797.
Section 2, The Science of the Smile.
Now that we know who she is and how she ended up in Paris, we really need to talk about why this painting is such a technical marvel. Let's look at the physical specs first. For starters, she isn't painted on canvas or paper. She's painted on poplar wood, which was totally the go-to material for Italian painters back then. Also, it's shockingly small. We're talking just 77 by 53 centimeters. But it was completely revolutionary because it was an ultra-close, half-length portrait. Like, nobody was using that framing style back then. You might also notice she looks kind of dull and yellowish today. It's actually so yellow that a medical professor once jokingly diagnosed Lisa with high cholesterol. But realistically, this is just because of a super thick layer of protective varnish they used to prevent moisture damage to the wood, combined with natural bleaching over the centuries. Originally, those colors were incredibly bright and vibrant. To get that hypnotic, almost dreamlike effect, Da Vinci used a technique called sfumato. It basically means the masterful blurring of outlines and blending of colors. If you look closely at the background, which, by the way, is the Arno Valley in Italy, there are absolutely no harsh, clear boundaries between Lisa and the landscape. It's crazy. In some places, the dark tones of her hair literally melt seamlessly straight into the shadows of the valley behind her. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer obsession Da Vinci had with getting human anatomy right. I mean, to perfect Mona Lisa's mysterious smile, Da Vinci spent countless nights in a hospital in Florence, literally peeling the skin off dead bodies. It's a bit gruesome, but he wanted to meticulously study how facial nerves and tiny lip muscles work together to form a smile. He even went as far as dissecting the faces of horses, just to compare their facial muscles to humans. He actually wrote, "The muscles which move the lips are more numerous in man than in any other animal." That just proves exactly how deeply he was studying the micromechanics of the mouth. But, Da Vinci didn't just stop at anatomy. He combined it with the science of human optics. He figured out that the center of our retina, the fovea, picks up fine details, while our peripheral vision is what picks up shadows. So he intentionally painted the physical line of her lips totally flat. When you look directly at her mouth with your detail-oriented fovea, she doesn't look like she's smiling at all. But when your eyes drift up to meet hers, your peripheral vision takes over. It catches those blended sfumato shadows at the edges of her mouth, and suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, the smile just magically appears. It is literally a visual trick. Section 3. The two Mona Lisas. Let's move to and see how this builds into one of the most mind-bending twists in art history. What if I told you there isn't just one Mona Lisa, but two? Yeah, the breadcrumb trail for this one starts way back in 1504 when another legendary artist, Raphael, made a rough pen and ink sketch of the Mona Lisa. But there was a massive, glaring discrepancy. Raphael's sketch featured two large architectural columns framing Lisa. The painting in the Louvre? No columns whatsoever. For years and years, people just brushed this off, assuming Raphael was taking some creative liberties. But then, in 1993, historians confirmed that Raphael actually lived directly across the street from the Giocondo family in Florence. He wasn't just guessing. He was drawing something he was actually looking at. And that something was eventually discovered in 1914 near London by a novelist named John R. Eyre. Today, it's known as the Isleworth Mona Lisa. When you place the Louvre painting right next to this Isleworth painting, the differences are striking. The Isleworth subject looks noticeably younger. Her head is tilted slightly forward. Her expression isn't that mysterious optical illusion. It's a very clear, straightforward smile. And crucially, right there in the background, are the two columns Raphael drew in his sketch. So what exactly is the deal with this second painting? Well, an investigation launched in 2010 by the Mona Lisa Foundation threw out a couple of major theories. One is that Da Vinci was simply working on two different versions, and the Isleworth painting was just an early experimental draft, which totally explains why she looks younger. The other theory is kind of a hybrid. The idea is that Da Vinci painted the masterful face and hands, but then he just handed the canvas off to a less skilled apprentice in his workshop to finish up the background. Honestly, to this day, it remains this fierce debate in the art world, with no rock-solid evidence either way. Section 4. Catching the Mastermind. Okay, so now that we fully appreciate the scientific genius, the rich history, and the sheer rarity of this artwork, let's jump back to 1911 and catch the mastermind who actually dared to steal it. The culprit was a guy named Vincenzo Peruggia, and he wasn't some suave Hollywood cat burglar. He was actually an employee at the Louvre. He was this fierce Italian nationalist who truly believed Da Vinci's masterpiece belonged in Italy, not France. After smuggling it out under that blanket, his downfall happened in a few painfully slow stages.
First, he hid the billion-dollar painting in his cramped apartment for 2 agonizing years while detectives scoured the globe. Eventually, he just lost his patience and tried to sell it to an art dealer in Florence named Giovanni Poggi. Well, Poggi immediately got suspicious, checked the back of the wood for the official museum stamp, and realized he was literally holding the most wanted object on Earth. Vincenzo was promptly arrested and, surprisingly, sentenced to just 6 months in prison. The prodigal painting finally made its triumphant return to the Louvre on January 4th, 1914. And trust me, they are not taking any more chances with her. Today, Madame Lisa sits behind military-grade bulletproof glass in a strictly climate-controlled environment. She's permanently kept right between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius with exactly 50% humidity just to perfectly preserve the wood and the paint. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you pondering one last thing. What is the ultimate historical irony of Vincenzo Peruggia stealing the Mona Lisa to bring it back to its homeland? So the crucial point is this. Before 1911, the Mona Lisa was definitely respected by art historians and critics, sure. But the general public? They didn't really know much about it. It was actually Vincenzo's crime that generated a 2-year worldwide media frenzy. When the painting was finally recovered, literally everyone on the planet wanted to see the artwork that was worth stealing. Vincenzo wanted to repatriate an Italian treasure, but instead he accidentally cemented a French museum exhibit as the undisputed #1 most famous painting in the world. So the next time you see that mysterious smile, you'll know exactly the wild history behind it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.